welcome back to my series of videos on authoritarianism. At the end of the last video, I mentioned George Orwell, who obviously wrote 1984, Animal Farm, these amazing cautionary tales, political cautionary tales. Now, George Orwell was an international socialist. He proudly proclaimed himself to be one. And his socialism was essentially, at its core, egalitarian. He's in essay after essay, he stated that he was for an equal society, a society where everybody has a chance, a victimless society, one with equal opportunity, and one where nobody wants for anything on account of an unreasonable or unfair distribution of privilege. So he was an egalitarian, international socialist. So you might think then that what he railed against was the free market, was, well, privileged classes and classism per se. You may think, since he was living and writing in the 30s and the 40s, that he would be railing against the empire and imperial conservatism, as it then was, and Winston Churchill and everything that he represented. Because, of course, Orwell was English, right? And he was writing at the time when Churchill was important and powerful. You would think that that's what he would be railing against, perhaps, as a pro-victimless society, egalitarian international socialist. But he wasn't. Not a bit of it. What George Orwell was most concerned about as an international socialist was the fact that, and he worked this out over years of being politically active, of fighting for socialism, of fighting with his colleagues on the left, that they were so enlightened, or so they felt themselves to be, that knowing that they had the right philosophy, socialism, that he agreed with, that they could basically impose it without regard to the emotions and feelings of the people affected by what they sought to impose. In fact, without regard to feelings and emotions of people in general. Because if you have the right theory, then it doesn't really matter what the data say, right? If you already know your theory is right, if you already know you have the right political philosophy. George Orwell states in 1984 that that what he's writing about is orthodoxy, right? He says that the evil is orthodoxy, and he says that orthodoxy is not thinking, not needing to think. He says that in 1984. Orthodoxy, in other words, is I already know better. I don't need to consider human beings because I have the philosophy. Jeffrey Tucker uses the word constructivist quite rightly to warn against any kind of systematic political imposition, right? Constructivist, because you construct a theory and then you just impose it. And I don't care if you're socialist or libertarian or, you know, a capitalist or whatever. If you believe that you have it right, you are a constructivist. You've constructed your theory. You are orthodox, right? You know the theory's right. There's no more thinking that needs to be done because you've worked it out. I agree with Orwell that you are dangerous, and I don't care what is motivating you. When George Orwell wrote Animal Farm, what he wrote was, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. He was warning against the abuse of the idea of equality, the thing at the core of his politics, right? He watched people on the left corrupt his socialism. He was warning against orthodoxy and the misuse of the philosophy that he agreed with. Not some other philosophy. He didn't say, all animals are free, but some are freer than others, which might have been a warning against the excesses of libertarianism or the misapplication of libertarianism and ideas of liberty. He didn't say some animals have opportunity, but others have more opportunity than others. That might have been a warning against capitalism or something like that, right? No, he had a go in some animals are equal, but some are, all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. In that line, his cautionary tale was against the application of what to him was the perfect political theory. And if you read Orwell, if you look at his essay, for example, My Country, Right or Left, check that essay out. He says, you can't judge a political theory just as a theory. You have to judge it in what would happen if it were applied, taking into account the nature of people. And therefore, you have to understand that no theory can be applied without regard to the nature, the emotions, the feeling of people. And he said this in this essay in 1940, where he was saying, you know what? Right now, there's a wave of patriotism, even of nationalism in England, as the English were fighting the Nazis. And he said, you know, I don't agree with the politics that is associated with this patriotism. Bear in mind, Winston Churchill, who was running England when George Orwell wrote that, was an imperialist conservative. But Orwell recognized that the feelings that were being harnessed in the defense of England, that patriotism, they were not to be poo-pooed just because they didn't fit into the socialist theory that he loved, right? Moreover, if the people who would be imposing his socialist world would not take into account those natural sentiments which he identified as being healthy just because they were part of human nature, that if people that he agreed with politically didn't take them into account in pursuing their political goals, if the goals themselves didn't take them into account, then those people would be dangerous. And he didn't want to be one of them. In other words, as an international socialist, in the end, he saw the dangers in the orthodox socialists, the communists. He saw more dangers in them than he saw in the people that he disagreed with, who at least took into account the natural instincts, were concerned with, admitted, responded to the honest feelings of fellow citizens. So yeah, even then, as one of the left, Orwell was warning the world against the misapplication of leftism. That's what he was scared of. That's what Animal Farm is about. All animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. If your theory can't be applied as it's supposed to be applied, then it doesn't matter how good it is in the abstract. It's a failure and it's dangerous. All right, we'll be back to talk more about this in the next video.